Welcome back to Time to Change. I'm Chason Forehand.
And I'm Dom Jones.
And we're having discussions with people doing the work.
Yeah, and that work is a result of some deep lived experience, some knowledge, but ultimately a passion to see better humans and better workplaces.
I love that. And I can't wait to dive in.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to Time to Change. I'm Chason Forehand.
And I'm Dom Jones.
And today in the house, Melissa Robinson-Winemiller, Dr. Melissa Robinson-Winemiller. Get it on, people. So excited to have you in the house today. So excited to talk about your book. And before we even get started, I'm actually going to read a section of your book that I found really interesting that I love. Here is her book. It's out, it's on the bestsellers list. It's already crushing it. And you scan that QR code right above Melissa's left shoulder. For me, it looks right. Yeah, there it is. Perfect. You did great. And that will take you right to purchase her book. But I want to read this for you because I thought this was fantastic. So this, let's see, get my bifocals going here. What's the difference between being nice and being empathetic? Can you be nice without showing empathy or be empathetic without being especially nice? Yes. Nice is a social construct. Society conditions us to be nice to one another because it makes living in the world around us easier. It's like having manners. It's not strictly necessary, but it makes human interaction smoother and more pleasant. In many ways, niceness is simply a behavior that people subscribe to. It smooths the social interaction, but doesn't necessarily create connection. Conversely, empathy is genuine connection between two people. In fact, because person A is not taking responsibility for person B, others might not view them as being nice. The outcome that might be nice for a single individual could be detrimental for an organization as a whole. Businesses will have to function, and leaders sometimes need to make decisions that are for the organizational good and not for the individual. One example that I've seen in many managers is performance evaluations. Managers often give high marks because it's nice. Someone showing empathy would rather see their employees learn and grow, even if that means a lower score. Whether you're a nonprofit, church, school, or business, let ourmerchpage.com become an extension of your marketing team. They'll handle the design, sourcing, fulfillment, and management of your merchandise marketing needs so you can stay focused on what matters most, your business. And I thought that was really impactful because one of the books that I've read in my life is by Kim Scott, and it's called Radical Candor. And I still love that book and talk. She's written more, and she's written addendums to that, or second books and whatnot. But your book talks about some of the nitty gritty things that other people don't talk about. And it reminded me of some of the sections where, you know what, I just want someone to be kind, but give me the real truth. Care enough about me as a human being and my growth that they are going to give me some radical candor.
Mhm.
And that to me is what empathy is all about because you have that connection with people. So I
Yeah.
love that you said that. I love that quote in your book, and I'm going to let Dom take it away from here.
Yeah. How did it feel having Chase and read your words like that?
That was that was kind of meta. I mean, because I've been
Yeah.
so deep into this book for so long, and
Yeah.
I'm actually recording an audio version. So I've heard the words in my own head and in my own voice. So to actually hear it coming from somebody else, it was kind of like, wow, I guess I did write that. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to sound in my voice. It sounds better in yours.
Yeah.
I was just going to say it probably sounds better at yours, but so one of the things we didn't talk about is the fact that she's a musician, classically
Mhm.
trained,
Yep.
and she was on last year's Feed for Good that we had and did a whole bunch of songs for us. It was absolutely fantastic. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's one thing, Melissa, to put your words out there, your thoughts out there in that form, but you're absolutely right. To hear it echoed back and in a way where you could tell it resonates, I know is meaningful for you. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the this book, The Empathetic Leader, and what prompted you to want to write this piece of work in the first place. What were you seeing out there that you chose to speak into the void?
So I feel I was, well, I don't feel it. I was really damaged by some unempathic leadership. And Chason's heard this before, so I'll keep it to the Cliff Notes version. But I was a classical musician. I was a French hornist. I played in orchestras. I toured. I played with Ray Charles. I played with Mannheim Steamroller. I got to do some really cool stuff. But, I also really like food, shelter, and clothing. And being a gigging musician, things like benefits are not stable. So I went back and got my doctorate and went out west to be able to be a French horn professor, which, it is really rare. I think it really hit home last week when I was talking to a group of people, and I'm like, how many of you here know a French horn professor? Crickets.
Yeah.
Not one. Because it's that rare. People don't realize it. So I went out there and I was like so excited to be doing this. This was what I wanted to do. I was going to get to work with students. I was still going to be gigging. I was still going to be writing. I was still going to be performing. And then within my very first term, I was assaulted by one of my colleagues, which I actually use as a narrative in that book, because I think it's one thing to say a lack of empathy is damaging. I think it's another to say a lack of empathy is damaging, and here's a story that shows it.
Mm.
You know, so eventually this spiraled until it ended my music career, which was really hard for me because that was all I'd ever wanted to do. And by then I was like 42, 43. So, I mean, it was like my whole life. And I kind of spun out for a while, but I was like, what caused this? What is it that there was this lack of anybody wanting to hear what was going on? And after just a lot of thinking and a lot of searching, and my husband and I did some consulting during that time, so I was able to start to see patterns arise. It just became really clear to me that this lack of empathy was the problem. Because empathy at its base isn't about feeling, it's about understanding and connection. And that's what wasn't there. There was not a human understanding and connection. So I ended up going back and doing some hard study on it and trying to make up for some lost time. But I wanted to be an advocate for the people who were suffering silently like I did. I mean, this ends careers, this destroys people, this messes up organizations. So why are we not talking about it?
Mm.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I loved about you, that I love about you, and that we kind of connected since the very beginning, because we're talking about your work and my work and Dom's work. We all talk about people and how important people are, people first cultures, having people first mentalities in your work and your business, and how there's a huge ROI. Having empathy and having EQ in your life, as a human and as a leader, is a key. It's
Yeah.
an absolute key. So talk about, you have a lot of different things that you talk about in the book. And the one, and I feel like it is kind of a guide. I think it's a guidebook in my mind, that like, hey, here's a leadership guidebook about what empathy, what EQ is, and how to use it in your daily life. And you give
Yeah.
great examples, and you give of background, and um, a lot of information for people to digest and come back to. There's several parts where I've come back. I've read the entire book, but there's several parts where I'll come back and reread a section like that one I read at the very beginning, because there's those nuances that you miss, those little things.
Mm.
And so I want you to speak to how you were able to take your own circumstances,
Mm.
and in a very constructive way talk about what's going on in the world, without having, hey, I don't want to take all the emotion and pour it out here, but I also want you to learn from my experiences and from what I see. So I guess my question is, how were you able to manage that process, to put it pen to paper, and share some very difficult things without just like losing it.
Mhm.
How do you practice that EQ and the empathy for yourself in this process?
Mm.
So one of the things I talk about in that book is self-empathy, which is it's kind of an interesting thing. There's not a lot of academic research on it. There's a lot out in the popular sphere, but as far as like the research that I'm doing on leadership and empathy, it's not really there. So I kind of dove into it myself because it's like this is a thing. We've recognized that self-empathy is a thing, and so if empathy is connection and understanding, then self-empathy is connection and understanding with yourself. And what I discovered is as I was going through all of this was that I maybe didn't have a lot of connection and understanding with myself because I had compartmentalized this for a long time. I mean, I just wasn't allowed to talk about it. I was kept quiet for the whole 7 years I was in that job. If I even spoke up at all, I was immediately right under other people's thumbs. And then when I got back out into the world and started trying to figure out how to make my way, same thing. I couldn't even talk about that I had a doctorate. I would just get kind of smacked down. So I didn't have a lot of empathy for myself because I just put up barriers with myself. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to know. And there was actually a point where I was completely ready to just kind of give up and say, this is it. I don't know what I'm going to do from here on out, but I obviously can't go back and I don't know how to go forward. So I don't know. And there was just something that was like, no, no, you can't. This is too important. If you've been put through this, there's a reason why. You hear from these other people, you talk to other people. This is a thing. This is a problem, and it's not an isolated incident. I am not the only one that person assaulted. I am not the only one in that system that had to deal with that lack of empathy. I am not the only one in systems that have to deal with it. And it's actually kind of unpopular. I've kind of gotten people saying, this doesn't make any sense. It's too soft. You can't bring it into business. It doesn't work in organizations. It's too feminine. That's a favorite. But it's like, no, there's too many people getting hurt by this. And something needs to be done. And I don't want other people to suffer in silence the way I did because it was soul crushing. And in that being able to understand and connect with myself a little better, I was able to start putting the book together. But that took years.
Mhm.
It's still happening. It's not over yet, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's so powerful, and I'm actually reflecting back on the excerpt that Chasen you read at the very beginning. I love to explore that theme a little bit further, and that's this interesting notion that as a leader you're either nice or you're not nice, and those are pointed as kind of like you're either nice or you're mean. And that those are the polar
Mm.
Yeah.
juxtapositions, but there is a ton of middle ground there. And I'd love for you to maybe speak into that a bit as you step into the middle ground of being an empathetic leader. What does that actually look like in practice?
It means actually connecting with your people. It means coming out of your office and talking to them. It means it doesn't matter if you're a CEO, you need to get out and know who's working with you because they're going to know their jobs and they're going to know what they're doing way better than you are. They're going to be able to bring you innovation.
Mhm.
They're going to be able to tell you how to make things more effective and more efficient. Through that, they're going to become more productive. Once you're more productive, then your bottom line gets better in two ways. You're going to start seeing more profit from the productivity and the innovation, but you're also going to have less attrition because
Yeah.
people are going to feel like they're treated like humans and not like cogs, you know?
Yeah.
So,
There's
I
a
mean,
huge ROI in that. Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So you have to decide, am I going to be nice, whatever that entails, or am I going to be kind? Clarity is kindness. Growth is kindness. It's not always nice. Sometimes it's really difficult, but it's way better than being nice.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the fact that you even brought up the in that excerpt the mid-year or the performance appraisal. And I think it's timely because we're still to a degree in that space where if you live and work in an organization, you're either preparing for a mid-year conversation or you're coming out of one. And that is a difficult space for many leaders because there often is this internal struggle between, do I really deliver the truth, or do I try to package it in a way where I water it down because I want to feel nice and I want to get along? So, given that that's a timely topic, um, how do you address that in a book as far as entering into this space of performance conversations effectively while still being an empathetic leader?
So let's go ahead and flip that on its head a little bit. Because if
Okay.
you, as a leader, are already out and you're talking to your people and you see what's happening and you know what's happening, you're probably in there day to day helping them improve. It
Mhm.
isn't a once, twice a year or once a year kind of thing. You don't necessarily, I mean, it may be part of the company culture, that sort of thing. But even if you have some news to give them that isn't particularly nice, they
Mhm.
should already know
Yeah.
because
Mm.
you've been in it with them up to your elbows. You're not waiting around for the performance appraisal and then it becomes a shock.
Mhm.
Mm.
It's much nicer to be in there and in the trenches and working with them side by side than it is to wait and then have everybody freak out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No
I
one should ever be no one should ever be confused by a review. No one
Yes.
should ever leave a review going, "Man, I didn't realize." It's it people should know what the literally they should almost really know what the review is going to be like when they step in the door. And if
Yes.
you've done a really great job of nurturing and having courageous conversations
Mhm.
with your people during the course of the year, then whether it's mid-year or it's a full year, which I am not a fan of waiting an entire year to
Yep.
talk to
Mm-mm.
people about their performance. But I digress. If you're in that space, then it shouldn't come as a shock. I never knew, especially when you've got these, 1 out of 5 and 3 is kind of like the middle ground, and
Mhm.
and no one ever gets 4s and 5s because you're not telling them anything,
Mhm.
and it's like, you're just you're doing a great job, so you got a 3. Here you go. And I just am like, "What?
Uh,
Why are we
Yeah.
not doing that?" But I look back at everything that we do in society, and you talk a lot about the
mhm.
reality of society and how we train people from the very beginning. When do we have conversations with kids about EQ?
Mm.
When do we have conversations with kids about empathy?
Yeah.
When do we
Yep.
teach them to have courageous conversations? You know,
Right.
after they've punched some kid in the face and you're trying to tell them not to use these. I mean, it's like, yeah, all right, now it's too late, you know? So one of the things that I love about your book, and I said this earlier, is the practical reality of taking life stories, the storytelling aspect that you did, not just your story, but I mean how you've experienced it with other people when you're speaking, because one of the great things that you do, and I'm loving watching you get on more stages and more stages and more stages, and that like right there. But as I watch you do this, and I got to view, your TED Talks, and I'm just like, I'm so excited for you. But how do you explain that process to people that are really honestly hearing it for the first time? And that's a shock, but these are people that have been in leadership for however long, and companies that are bringing you in to talk to about this, and literally this is like the first time they've ever had this conversation. How do you just not how do you focus in on the conversation and everything else and not just be like, I don't even understand what's happening here.
Well, I mean, I was a professor for a long time, so I still kind of think of it as a teaching opportunity.
Good for you. Yeah.
They're not doing it because they don't know. It's not that they're like, no, I'm not doing empathy. It's not like that. It's that they don't get it because they haven't been taught. And that's not fair to hold that against them if they haven't been taught. So I have the privilege of maybe being the first one who goes in to teach it. And so I started out just like I do in the book. There's 43 kinds of empathy. They fall into 8 broad categories. We're going to talk about 3. We're going to talk about emotional empathy. We're going to talk about cognitive empathy, which is when you logically understand what's going on, but you don't feel anything. And we're going to talk about self empathy because a lot of these people are very motivated. They're very highly driven. They're very high self actualizing. I mean, they're gunners for a reason. And what they've done has worked. That's why they're in the position they're in. So now let's step back and see what happens if you actually give empathy to yourself. Because once you start there, now you can start giving it to other people because you understand what it is at that basic level. And the self-empathy aspect in particular kind of makes people go, oh. I was talking to some lawyers at one point and they're like, we can do that? Can we do that? I guess we can do that. you know, but we don't teach it. Other countries teach it. They teach what's called social emotional learning. But again, okay, we're missing it in our schools because the United States has kind of crammed other things in there that aren't social emotional learning, and now it has a bad reputation. However, what an awesome opportunity because now we can have adult learning. Think about the first major organization that brings social emotional learning in as part of their organizational culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Huge.
Yeah.
Did you give an example of a couple of countries that are teaching it and having real great success with it early on?
Yeah. The Norse countries in particular, Denmark has been like number 1 top 10 happiest nation like since the 70s, since the Nixon administration. And they teach social emotional learning. Iceland, which has gone to the 4-day work week and is being very successful at it, is always in the top 5. Norway is always in the top 5. Other European countries like France and England are starting to bring it on more. A lot of Asian nations are bringing this in, particularly like Japan and a little bit in China, which is very interesting because the cultures are very different, right? High
Yeah.
context versus low context, high touch versus low touch, high emotion versus low emotion, that kind of thing. But they're also seeing a certain amount of positive outcome from this, especially as then they track these kids as they get older and they get into leadership positions and they get into organizations. And, this does carry through. It's a thing.
So this is why I like talking to people with doctors and their title because I always learn so much. Um, it's this is what to your point. This is one of those topics where it's so salient across so many areas of life. Chason, you were mentioning about the value of teaching it to a child, but think about how just learning to be effective and developing acumen in this area, how that sets you up in school and sports teams
Yes.
and business and families.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
where I'm setting you up to talk about your book, just know this. People learning this for the first time, give them some baby steps to start out to just wrap their minds around this concept and how to start implementing it just starting in their house and then bleeding into their other areas of life.
Absolutely. Because I make that point as well that empathy is a transferable skill. You can use it in your families, you can use it in your communities, you can use it on yourself to be a leader of one.
Yeah.
It's one of those human glue things that actually brings us all together. And I really do believe charity starts at home. So if you don't have a better place to start with yourself. And with self empathy, there's 3 really distinct ways of getting to that. I don't get into it too much in this book necessarily, just because, you know, I wanted it to be really accessible and relatively short because people in leadership positions don't have a lot of time. So it's short for a reason. The next book I'm going to go into the self-empathy thing a whole lot more. But you start with self-reflection, being able to turn that lens in and say, this is what I'm doing. This is what happened. This is how it made me feel. This is how it impacted my life. Always with no judgment, because empathy and judgment cannot exist in the same space.
Mm.
So if at any moment you're feeling judgment either for yourself or somebody else, that's not empathy.
Mm. Hmm.
So that's a big clue.
Wow. Yeah,
So
that's
starting
fantastic.
starting with the self-reflection, understanding, turning the lens in. Then you go to self-awareness where you're turning the lens out. How am I fitting in with other people? How is this fitting into my organization? How is this fitting into my family? How am I making other people feel? What am I doing? How could I maybe change this dynamic so that we can have better understanding? We can have better connection. And once you've turned the lens in and you've turned the lens out, you can start to have that self empathy and say, okay, now I understand why I did what I did. I'm starting to connect with myself so I connect with other people. I can understand and connect with myself, which means now I can understand and connect with the organization as a whole, with people as a whole, beginning to create that human web, really, you
Yeah.
know?
I love that you talk about teaching it. Like I had to learn that you actually could teach it because I thought really probably until about 2020, I felt like you either had EQ or you didn't. You were either born with it and you have this or you're not, and you're a lost cause. And I had to unlearn that. So, I mean, you talk about this in your book, but you talk about it in when you are on stage as well. How can we change the narrative? Because I'm not alone. I was not alone
Mhm.
in that thought process
Mhm.
that you either have it or you don't. Um, and there are still some people, here we are in 2025, there are still stuck in that. So, what do you say to someone, whether it's a leader, whether it's another human being that's listening to you? What do you say to somebody that is like, I don't have this, I can't learn it?
Mm.
If you're strictly talking about affective or emotional empathy, which is the I feel what you feel, and that's the one that society mostly recognizes. I mean, if you actually mention that there's more than one kind of empathy, people go, because it's,
Yeah. Uh,
Mhm.
it's just kind of beyond what most people know.
Mhm.
Even if we're only talking about that, because empathy takes in biology, neurobiology, psychology, philosophy, all of these different things.
Mhm.
They figure 92 to 95% of the human population has it to some degree. Now, like any other talent or behavior, it's on a spectrum. So some people are going to be a lot better at it than others. But most of us have it at least a little bit. Even if we compartmentalize it, even if we keep it down, it's there, which means we don't have to learn it. We have to practice it.
Mhm.
Practice makes permanent.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, cognitive empathy, especially in organizations, is a big one that I logically understand. I get it. I don't feel it, but I get it. Because especially if you're in a leadership position, if you're barraged by everybody else's feelings and problems and issues, all day, every day, you're going to burn out. And
mm,
that's no good. We want our good leaders to stay where they're at and keep leading. So by being able to cognitively connect, you're going to actually be able to employ more empathy and better empathy and in a way that serves the greatest amount of people. Keep a cool head and a warm heart.
mm,
That's exactly what that is.
very cool.
Wow. Well, I can't wait to dig into the book, and thank you, Melissa, for writing it in a way where it's accessible and people, even like Chasen, can read it and understand it. We
Yes.
appreciate you.
E- Even like him. That is right there, but you notice I had to take my glasses off because I can't. My bifocals aren't even working. And I'm like, what
Oh,
is happening here?
no, Chasen, you know I love you, buddy.
I know you do,
Yeah.
man. And thank goodness, where most of our crew now is going to hear us because we're out in audio form everywhere. They don't get to see that. They don't get to see that happening.
That's
So,
right.
oh my
I
goodness.
feel
Well,
you, Chasen. I
that
feel you.
QR code. Scan that QR code above Melissa's left shoulder. Get this book in your hands. Read it. Live it, learn it, love it. It's going to help you with your relationships. It's going to help you with your leadership. It's going to help you be a better employee. It's fantastic. So get that in your life. Melissa, thank you so much. Another round of applause. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for being in the house. Time to change. I'm Chason Forehand,
And I'm Dom Jones.
and we'll catch you next time.